Okay, so we're just a few days away from Mark Carney's cabinet swearing in. And in Ottawa, that means that political reporters and pundits are probably making bets about who's in and who's out. Here are some of the key faces to watch for, and I'm going to do my best to get through all of them quickly and not mispronounce any of them. Okay, the people that you already know in cabinet: Dominic LeBlanc, Mélanie Joly, François Champagne, Anita Nunn, and Chrystia Freeland. Some of them could be moved. There's also some high-profile rookie MPs coming in, maybe into cabinet. Tim Hodgson, former special advisor to Mark Carney at the Bank of Canada. He was also the former CEO of Goldman Sachs Canada. That probably puts him in the running. There's also Claude Gay. He's the former CEO of IBM Canada. Carlos Leitao, he's the former Quebec finance minister. And of course, we have Nathalie Provost, an engineer and survivor of the École Polytechnique massacre. There's also 3 current ministers who only just got into cabinet right before the election: Ariel Kayabaga, Cody Bloy, and Ali El-Sassi. Those are people that we are watching for. A lot of names to pour over, but don't you worry, our front bench has their picks and their hot takes on who they think who could be in and who could be out of cabinet. So let's bring them back. We have Sabrina Grover, Anthony Kosh, Gurritan Singh, and Rachel Aiello. Sabrina, you get to start us off with your 2 picks. Who do you think could be moving?
Is this our Coachella? Like, is this Coachella for nerds? I think it is. Okay, my picks are, I think that Leslie Church is a rookie, but I think that she is in. She came back from a by-election loss in June to win this seat in this round, and I think that she's quite talented, has a depth of experience from both her staffing time as a staffer and prior to that. So I see her coming in possibly in foreign affairs or maybe international trade. And for returning,
that's a hot take.
I would say is that's why I'm here. Mel's not here, so that's what I'm doing today. And then I think from our returning cabinet ministers, I think that FPC Francois Philippe Champagne, I see him moving possibly into the infrastructure role. I think that as we see Canada really double down on domestic strengthening and think about some of these big projects that need to take place inside our borders, I think that FPC brings the talent from ISED. He managed some massive deals on that side, and I think that he is somebody that's relatable to the provinces, somebody that's likable, and I think that that's going to be that could be a great role for him.
Equally hot take because of where he is right now. Anthony, your shot.
So for a newcomer, the newbie, who's not really all that much of a political newbie, I'm a Montreal boy like you, Mike, and Carlos Leitao was a widely heralded, very successful Minister of Finance in Quebec from 2014 to 2018. In fact, he was so popular and so widely well regarded that when the CAQ ran in 2018 to unseat his government, which they were successful doing, even they had to heap praise for his management of the finances of the province, and went as far as to basically reassure voters and saying, don't worry, we're not going to deviate too far from what Mr. Leitao had cooking. So I very much expect to see him come in either the Treasury Board position or potentially maybe even be considered for finance, given his pedigree, both in the private sector, but also as finance minister for Quebec. And I think a broader comment I am expecting a relatively Quebec-heavy cabinet from Mark Carney for a number of reasons, partially related to his overperformance in the province in the last election. And then for the people that are already in cabinet, it's been widely circulated already, the rumor mill. Who always knows what to make of that in Ottawa? But there's been a lot of talk about Mélanie Joly being moved out of the foreign affairs minister position. Obviously, in the context of a general election campaign with all the stuff that was coming out of the United States of America, there was no chance that Mark Carney was going to make any changes in that position in the pre-election context or even during the election, obviously. But now that their mandate's been secured and there's been some very impressive people elected that are going to be making it into cabinet, and some already people who've held high-profile cabinet portfolios that are going to be remaining in cabinet, I think we should expect to see her moved somewhere else and somebody else to take that job. She's been widely regarded as a bit of a laggard or poor performer in that position. And I think if you're looking at major incumbent ministers that are supposed to be moved around, I think she's probably somewhere near the top of your list.
Yeah, and back to Leitao, when I worked in Montreal as a young reporter, I would interview him on a number of occasions. He was the chief economist at Laurentian Bank, so that is more adding to his pedigree, you know. Rachel, you're next. Who do you have?
Yeah, so for my pick for who I think is getting in is Tim Hodgson. He won in Markham Thornhill. He was the former Goldman Sachs banker. Yeah. And I just want to read you a little bit of praise he's received. Tim Hodgson is one of Canada's top investment bankers. He is widely recognized for his exceptional transaction skills and understanding of how markets work. Who said that? Mark Carney. Mark Carney said that when he was named to be his special advisor at the Bank of Canada. So clearly these two men have a strong working relationship. I'm expecting him to come in some capacity. My guess would be finance, although that might be a bit too obvious. We shall see. But I do think he is a strong contender and an Ontario minister to get into the fold. As for the hot take on who I think could be moving is actually someone who I think isn't. Chrystia Freeland in internal trade. I know she's one of the ones we keep talking about in this cabinet shuffle in the context of is she still going to be in? And I think she is, specifically because of the job she has right now in this interprovincial trade role, because Mark Carney has promised Canadians to lift interprovincial trade barriers by Canada Day. It'd be quite a choice to move her out with that deadline fast approaching.
Yeah, and likely internal trade, not international trade,
right.
Given
far away from Donald Trump.
Far away from Donald Trump, who didn't name her, but certainly mentioned her on Tuesday. Gerdeton, you're up.
So the interesting take, I think, is we're going to have McKinnon back into his position as minister. I believe it's called Jobs and Families. And the question, though, is will they take the response from those in the labor movement who said we need a minister of labor? So that's the question I have. I think there was a pretty clear communication from labor leaders when there was that ministry was no longer there, was renamed rather. But given how we've seen this southwestern sweep of conservatives across Windsor and these other areas, I think it's important that the Liberals communicate that connection to labor again. So having him not just in that role, but that specific label of labor, I think that's going to be really important to keep an eye out for how that plays out. And secondly, I think Gregor Robertson from BC, former mayor of Vancouver, big name, big profile individual. I believe have a position in cabinet. What position? That's to be determined. But I just think, given his profile, given that their performance was, I think, not exactly what they did well, the Liberals, but I think they want to do a bit better potentially in BC. I think he becomes a good anchor, a good communicator for that region. Yeah, and Sabrina, some of these people don't run if they don't think that they're going to have a high-profile job. And I mean, look, everybody runs to serve, and I don't want to assign any type of intent on any of them, but certainly one would have to think that that is what they're thinking. So there probably is some pressure on Mark Carney. The other pressure on Mark Carney is trying to make sure that this doesn't look exactly like the last cabinet under the last prime minister. How much do you think that is figuring in his decisions over the next couple of days as he finalizes this list?
I think there's very little chance that it looks like the last cabinet. I mean, we had this conversation when he did this cabinet shuffle after being elected as leader, and there was almost no opportunity for it not to look like the last cabinet because he hadn't elected a bunch of new MPs yet. With the, vast incoming of talent into this government, I think there's a huge opportunity to shake things up. And a lot of the people that were elected do bring a lot of talent and specialized experience, as you've heard just on this, in this round. I think what will be interesting is to see what is the size of cabinet. Is it as small as he announced right after his leadership, or does it expand? I think it's going to need to expand. I think that was really kind of a wartime cabinet, as he may have called it, but it's going to need to expand. You can't have things like Indigenous Affairs and Attorney General in the same cabinet position. Even families and jobs, I think that those are going to have to come apart. So I think there's room to expand a little bit, and I think it'll be interesting to see kind of where the rookies might go into those positions.
And it's interesting, though, Anthony, because, yes, there are people with experience that are coming into government that he could possibly trust in those roles, but there are also key roles. And I'm thinking of somebody like Dominic LeBlanc, who it sounds like, from everything that we're hearing behind the scenes, has a good relationship with Howard Lutnick, his sort of, the counterpart that he has south of the border. And he is somebody who was a good friend of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So if he stays in his position, you know, what will opposition parties say about how different this cabinet really is?
Yeah, I mean, listen, opposition parties are always going to try to find things. As somebody who's been a part of the scripting of these very kinds of attacks, that's part of your job, is trying to find sort of things to criticize. But I think, and one thing that I've been saying internally to Conservatives that has upset a lot of people is that as far as your typical Canadian is concerned right now, they have a new government. Even if a lot of the people, the moving parts are similar to the ones that we saw before, as far as normal, regular, relatively nonpartisan people are concerned, they feel like they've actually gotten some change. Okay? So when maybe that will change, it's possible over the course of the next few years, if Mark Carney makes some missteps, people will say, oh, it's just the same old Liberal Party. But I actually do think that in the meantime, he's got a lot of good graces and people will be relatively benevolent. So I don't think it's as simple or as required right now for him to sort of line up everybody who had a personal relationship with the former Prime Minister and send them out to pasture. And I think that somebody like Dominic LeBlanc, it's a very easy spin. If I was a Liberal and I was explaining why Dominic LeBlanc needed to stay in cabinet, I'd just be honest and I'd list the exact reason that you just did, which is he has decent relationships with American officials, and right now that's kind of something that Canada is in short supply of and in great need of. So I'm not so concerned about that. I don't think the Liberals should be too cocky and take advantage of this goodwill, but I think they also should be recognizant of the fact that they do have this goodwill.
Gerdeton, what do you think in terms of how do they spin this cabinet?
I think the reality is at this current moment, the criticism that they're going to face around there being the same cabinet or the new cabinet is, as said earlier, it's not going to be something that Canadians really care about right now. They see a new Prime Minister. It is a new government. And I would say for opposition parties at this time, that kind of really, you know, clear partisanship is not, there's not an appetite right now amongst Canadians for
Agreed.
that. Canadians right now want someone who's going to just take care of these really pressing issues. What did we just hear about the GM plant in Oshawa, that there's further closures there? Like, as we have these conversations, we have to understand there's a very real impact to working people right now. Unionized jobs, workers across the board, they're losing their jobs. And they're not going to be, there's no appetite for this, you know, kind of mudslinging around, oh, you're the same cabinet, another cabinet. They want to just have a clear leadership standing up to these tariffs and guiding Canadians, hopefully towards a path where we can maintain our economy, maintain jobs, and maintain the services that people rely upon.
Okay, unfortunately, I have to leave it there. I appreciate everybody's input. Sabrina Grover, Anthony Kosh, Gerdeton Singh, and Rachel Aiello, thank you so much for being with us.